Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session. It's lovely to see so many people here, and I guess to get a little flavour from the chat room about the different places that people are joining us from. Before we start, I just wanted to read a little section from something that Margaret Wheatley wrote, which hopefully sets the tone a little bit of what we're going to be doing today. So, I believe we can change the world if we start listening to one another again. Simple, honest, human conversation, not mediation, negotiation, problem solving, debate, or public meetings. Simple, truthful conversation where we each have a chance to speak, we each feel heard, and we each listen well. Human conversation is the most ancient and easiest way to cultivate the conditions for change. Personal change, community and organisational planetary change. If we can sit together and talk about what's important to us, we begin to come alive. We share what we see, what we feel, and we listen to what others see and feel. So that's from Margaret Wheatley, and I hope that's a helpful start to our session this morning. My name is Janet Whitley. I'm from the Collective Leadership for Scotland team, and the team that are hosting the session this morning are myself, along with Dot McLaughlin, also from Collective Leadership for Scotland, and Martin Kalungu-Banda from the Presencing Institute, and Verena Albrecht from the Collective Leadership for Scotland team is helping us with the session this morning too. You're all very welcome. I guess just a very brief word about what we're hoping to do this morning. And I think obviously there's a sense in terms of our current experience with the pandemic that there's really some important aspects that we need to be thinking about and learning from, but we don't always have the time for that, and nor do we necessarily always create the kind of space where it's possible to do the kind of reflection that really helps us to learn. So in thinking about these sessions, we were very aware that we're in a kind of critical moment in time, but also we might not be feeling in the best position to be taking advantage of that moment and really do the reflection on what's important, both for us now, but also very much in terms of the generations which follow. So in creating these sessions, we're really inviting you to be part of a conversation, to listen to one another, to connect with one another, and to really try and access what is really important from the experience that we're all going through at present. And what do we need to carry from that in terms of what we're learning and what can carry us into the next stages of our work and of our lives. With those very brief words of introduction, I should also mention that we're recording the main aspects of the session, clearly not anything that takes place in breakout rooms, but the main aspects will be recording, just so you're aware of that. And I'll pass on now to my colleague Dot, who'll say something briefly about the run of the programme.
So welcome everyone, it's really nice to see you. Yeah, what we're going to be doing today is just, we're going to go into a bit of a check-in just shortly, and then we'll have a more of a sort of input later on after we've had some breakout rooms, and then we'll start to think about just where we go from here, what happens next. So just to check in this morning, how we're going to do that is to just to notice kind of, sorry, before we do that, can I just say one of the things that we want to talk about is the base camp groups. So we're also interested in, you know, these spaces of welcome, you know, where people can actually come and kind of connect to one another, to go a bit deeper in terms of the kind of community sort of sense of being part of something alongside others. So we're also going to be running what we call base camp groups, and they'll happen every week in between the main sessions that we're running with Martin and the team. So if people want to sign up to this, we'll kind of come back to it a bit later in the programme. But if people are interested in those, you can actually have a look on the website and kind of book into those. But they're just a time to really camp around some of the issues, come with questions, thoughts, reflections that are kind of happening from these sessions or anything else that's important to you right now. So we'll just, I don't know, Janet, do you want to say anything else before we go into the checkout, or does that seem okay?
I think that sounds fine if we want to move into check-in.
Yeah, great. So how we're going to do that, we just want to also, create a space for people to connect together this morning. And how we're going to do that is maybe a bit different. Sometimes we'll just hear from everybody in the room individually. But what I'm going to do is just shortly is to ask you a question. And I just want to give you a couple of minutes just to let that question sink in, percolate. And then another few minutes to just journal. So really, if you've got a pen and paper handy, it's just an opportunity to stop and just to record for yourself anything that's kind of coming up for you from the reflection on the question. So that'll just kind of take about 5 minutes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to break into breakout rooms for a discussion in groups of 4, and then we'll come back into a plenary session after that. So if you want to just take a moment just to breathe and to be here, to be present, and just to think for a couple of minutes about the question that I'm going to ask. So what are you noticing about yourself and the world around you in this time of extreme disruption? So that question again, what are you noticing about yourself and the world around you in this time of extreme disruption? Just a couple of moments just to centre on that question. And then just taking a minute or two to note down just anything, any response that you have to that question. It could be a feeling, it could be some thoughts, it might be a connection to something else that's going on. But just a few minutes just to write down anything that you want to capture that feels important. So just a moment to finish that off, and then we'll break into smaller groups to discuss that.
I think we'll move on now to Martin, who's going to take us through the next session.
Thank you very much, everyone. Kind of very compacted richness of thoughts, applied learning from the group that I participated into the plenary. Absolutely insightful. Permit me to just offer another line of reflection, certainly not new and still unfolding in terms of ways of interpreting things. So these are just some of the things we in the Presencing Institute community are picking. It's not scientifically established, but you can play with this as a lens for seeing, one of the lenses you might work with for seeing and making sense of what is going on around us currently. That we humans might be responding differently to natural disasters and pandemics. That in natural disasters, we tend to feel for others. An earthquake happens in some part of the world, maybe in our region, but far away from where we are. Drought, flood, earthquake, all forms of natural disasters. We tend to respond to that with an open heart. We feel connected to the people impacted, to the regions affected. Somehow we push ourselves into an area where we are seeking to understand what happened. How can we help? We are accessing our open mind to try and be of support, to try and understand how that happened. We also easily tend to find ways of, I can contribute. Maybe it's campaigning, maybe it's a small contribution here and there. Sometimes it's offering our skills, our labor to help the situation. There is this perception that in a pandemic, the response could be somewhat different. We feel attacked, vulnerable, and we can switch to closed-heartedness. That we immediately, unless we stop and think about it, do not connect with other people. We move into securing ourselves. This partly explains in some instances where I go to a supermarket to buy boxes of tissue because that's one of the things I need to stock. As we deal with the pandemic, we saw that I couldn't even imagine that there were other people behind me who were lining up for the same product, and I took as much as my money could buy without thinking, can I buy enough to allow other people also, even if it's not sufficient for the period of time I anticipate to be in trouble. In a pandemic, we can tend to deny reality, what's going on, and blame others. We function from a closed mind. We only see the data that we want to see. And we can, if we don't stop and make other choices, disconnect with our highest potential. So we function with a closed will. When we are unable to tap into the best of who we can possibly be. This is a caricature of responses, but it's some line of thinking around how we humans may be responding to the pandemic as opposed to natural disaster. And that is in a way that makes me feel we need to tap into our three sources of intelligence, three sources of knowing when we are in a pandemic, so that we may tap into what we would ordinarily do if we were in a natural disaster situation. And these three intelligences, which we have often talked about, are open mind, to work with the fact that we humans are constantly dealing with multiple possibilities, solutions, but we need to open ourselves to new information, new data, new levels of understanding. But we also then need to learn to increase our capacity to tap into the intelligence of the open heart, that our heart does know, that many traditional wisdoms throughout human history have spoken about the heart knowing. It is not just a blood pumping machine at all. It is what allows us to connect with people and places, and that we humans have an open will. That which clicks when we function with an open mind and an open heart, we see slightly more than usual. And then something shifts. When that shifts, that is what gives us the capacity to take action. The ability to move into, we can solve this, we can manage this. When it's sufficient enough, the open will is a point at which we cannot not do. It's like we have lost the freedom not to act. And therefore, I would like to invite you to the obvious, to listen into our body. One of our common teachers, Arawana Hayashi, says, the language of the body is feeling. Our body speaks through our feelings. And therefore, the body is an antenna for sensing current reality. And if we only live in our heads, we can miss the opportunity to tap into our body's natural capacity to pick what's going on. There are times when I wake up and my shoulders feel heavy. It isn't just about not sleeping well. It might be, but quite often there is some data there that if I pay attention, will help me understand what's going on. But also, our body helps us to pick what is in the offing, what is emerging, that which hasn't become clear yet. But for both things to happen, sensing the now and picking what is on the horizon requires us to stop and attend, listen to the language of the body, which is feeling. May I just invite you for a moment for you to tune into that. What is the language of my body now? In the last few days and few weeks. What feelings are there? And here is a question for us to spend a few minutes in trios to just share. But sharing from having tuned into the language of the body, what we feel. So the question is, what do I sense my body is leaning into in response to the current disruption? What do I sense my body is leaning into in response to the current disruption? Take a few minutes there and then we'll come back and share reflections in plenary.
Okay, well, I think we're about out of time. So thank you. I'm looking at all the comments in the chat, which we'll look through carefully. Thank you so much again, everyone, for coming along this morning. I hope it has been a valuable session. And we look forward to seeing perhaps some of you at future sessions over the coming weeks. So thank you and goodbye.